It was late October when I first noticed the strange car following me. I'd just started a new job at a small diner in rural Wisconsin, a place that was quiet enough during the day but utterly desolate at night. I worked the late shift from 4 p.m. to 11:30 p.m., and the roads home were mostly empty, winding through dense forests and small town neighborhoods. I'd lived in cities all my life, so the silence of these back roads always felt oppressive, but I had learned to deal with it. That was before the black sedan started showing up. The first night it happened, I didn't think much of it. I was driving my beat-up Chevy home, headlights barely illuminating the wet asphalt, when I noticed the car behind me. A black sedan, engine running, headlights dim. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw a tall figure sitting in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, staring straight at me. My stomach turned, and I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe it was someone who lived on my street. Maybe they were headed the same way. I parked in my driveway and the car disappeared into the night. I tried to shake it off and went inside, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next night, it happened again. This time, the car followed me all the way down the long, dark road leading to my apartment. I tried changing lanes, speeding up, taking detours, but it matched my every move. When I reached my driveway, it stopped a few yards away and stayed there, engine idling. I watched from my car as a man stepped out, tall, thin, face obscured by a hood. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, staring at me. After a few moments, he turned and walked back to the car, then drove off slowly. My hands were shaking as I locked my door, and I didn't sleep that night. Over the next week, the car began appearing in different locations. Parked near the diner when I arrived for my shift, at the grocery store when I went to pick up food, even once parked outside my friend's apartment when I went to visit. Every time I saw it, the same figure was inside, sometimes standing outside, always watching. I stopped going out alone. I started carrying a small knife, keeping my phone ready, trying to feel safe, but nothing helped. The presence of the car and the figure was enough to make me jump at every sound. One night, after a particularly late shift, I came home to find my front door slightly ajar. I knew I had locked it. My heart pounded as I stepped inside, scanning the apartment. Nothing was moved, nothing stolen, but the air felt heavy, oppressive, like someone had been there and was still lingering. On the kitchen counter there was a note, crudely written in black marker, "I see you." I froze, feeling my chest tighten. My hands were trembling too badly to call anyone. I stayed in my bedroom all night, lights on, doors locked, waiting for dawn. The police were no help. I had called once before when the car had followed me down the road, and they had come, checked the area, and found nothing. They suggested I stay with a friend for a while, but I didn't have anywhere to go. The figure seemed patient, and that patience made it worse. It didn't need to attack, didn't need to speak. Just existing, watching, was enough to make my nights unbearable. I tried everything. I installed new locks on my doors, reinforced windows, even set up cheap security cameras. Every night, I would check the footage obsessively. Sometimes the cameras would pick up nothing, and other times I would see the figure standing at the edge of my driveway, watching. One night, I saw it for hours, just standing there, hood over its head, face unseen. When I checked the footage the next morning, it was gone, as if it had vanished into thin air. Sleep became impossible. I would wake at all hours to the sound of footsteps outside my bedroom door, the creak of floorboards, the faint hum of a car engine idling somewhere nearby. I would lie awake, gripping a knife or baseball bat, listening to every sound, imagining the worst. The simplest noises, a branch scraping against the window, a cat knocking over a trash can, set my nerves on edge. Every shadow in my apartment became a threat. I couldn't trust my own mind to distinguish between fear and reality anymore. Then came the night I realized it wasn't just watching from outside. I woke to the sound of a door opening slowly, a hinge creaking in the dark. I didn't have a spare key and the door was locked. My bedroom door was shaking slightly, as if someone was testing it. I grabbed my baseball bat, heart racing, and whispered a warning, "Stay out." There was no answer, just silence. Then the footsteps retreated, slow, deliberate, leaving me paralyzed on the floor. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. After that, I couldn't stay in my apartment. I packed what I could, left without telling anyone, and drove hundreds of miles, staying in cheap motels, friends' houses, anywhere I could find a temporary refuge. But it followed me. I would see the black sedan parked nearby, always at a distance, always watching. Sometimes I caught glimpses of the tall, thin figure in the peripheral vision, standing in shadows, disappearing when I looked directly. I realized then that this wasn't a person who would give up. It was patient. It had no reason to rush. It had all the time in the world. Every hotel room, every friend's house, every place I tried to hide felt unsafe. I slept with lights on, doors locked, exits clear. I never went out alone. I started planning my movements hours in advance, mapping out routes with multiple escape options. Even mundane tasks, going to the store, walking to a friend's car, became exercises in fear management. Every sound, every shadow, every movement outside my windows made me jump. Weeks turned into months. My work suffered. I stopped answering calls from coworkers, missed shifts, avoided social interaction. I was always watching, always alert. The sense of dread never left. I stopped trusting anyone. I stopped believing I could be safe. I knew, deep down, that it would never stop, that it would wait until I made a mistake. One night, I stopped at a 24-hour convenience store for coffee. As I walked toward the door, I saw it, the figure, tall and thin, standing in the lot. My heart froze. I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything, but my legs refused to move. The figure didn't come closer. It just stood there, silent, patient, watching me. When I finally forced myself to move, it disappeared. I drove around for hours, trying to shake the fear, trying to convince myself I had imagined it. But I knew I hadn't. I knew the figure existed, and I knew it would find me again. It was only a matter of time. Years have passed since that night. I've moved from city to city, state to state. I never stay in one place for more than a few weeks. Every apartment, every motel, every house feels like it could be the next place I'm confronted with the figure. I sleep with lights on, doors locked, windows reinforced. I don't walk alone. I don't go out at night, and even now I can feel it, always, somewhere in the distance, waiting. It doesn't need to touch me to terrify me. Its patience is enough. Its presence is enough. And I know that someday, if I make one wrong move, it will catch me. Story, the end. The night I will never forget started like any other Thursday evening. I had stayed late at the office, finishing reports no one would even read. The sky outside had been dark for hours, and rain was falling in a steady, insistent drizzle that soaked the streets and glistened on the windows of my car. I was driving through a rural stretch of Pennsylvania, the kind of back road where the trees crowd the pavement and the fog hangs low, swallowing the headlights whole. Normally, I avoided this route, but I was tired, wanted to shave a few minutes off my commute, and figured I knew these roads well enough. It didn't take long for things to feel wrong. At first, it was subtle, a sense that I wasn't alone, that the dark beyond my headlights was moving when it shouldn't. I passed the first bend in the road and saw a figure standing on the shoulder, completely still. My initial thought was that it was a person waiting for a ride, but as I approached, my headlights caught its face, and I saw something impossible. Its eyes were completely black, reflecting no light, and its skin looked almost translucent, wet with the rain. I slammed on my brakes and swerved into the ditch to avoid it. My heart pounded, adrenaline pumping so hard I thought I might black out. When I looked back, it was gone. I told myself I had imagined it, my mind playing tricks because I was tired and driving through fog. But the unease didn't leave. The feeling of being watched, the sensation that something large and unnatural was following me, pressed on me like a weight. Minutes later, I saw another figure. This one was closer, standing in the middle of the road, head tilted in a way that made my stomach knot. I had nowhere to swerve this time. I braked hard, tires squealing, heart hammering against my ribs, and it didn't move. Its eyes locked onto mine, black and unblinking. I jerked the wheel to the right, almost losing control, and sped past it. When I looked in the rearview mirror, I thought I saw dozens of shapes emerging from the tree line, gliding toward the road silently. My pulse raced, and I floored the accelerator, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The rain had turned the road slick, and visibility was nearly zero. As I rounded a sharp curve, I hit something. The car jerked violently and skidded into the ditch, it mud spraying everywhere. I scrambled out, soaked to the bone, heart hammering in my chest. That's when I heard it, a wet, scraping sound coming from the ditch beside me. I turned my flashlight toward it, and my stomach dropped. A body, or what appeared to be a body, was crawling out of the mud, its limbs twisting at impossible angles, its eyes fixed on me. Its mouth opened in a silent scream, a soundless plea that made my skin crawl. I ran back to my car, fumbling with the keys, my mind screaming at me to get out. As soon as I started the engine, I saw more figures stepping onto the road. Pale, wet, unblinking, moving in ways no human should. I swerved, nearly losing control, heart hammering. I couldn't call 911. My phone had died somewhere in the ditch when I skidded off. I drove recklessly, headlights cutting through the fog, trying to put as much distance as possible between myself and whatever was out there. The figures didn't chase me in a traditional sense. They just moved alongside the road, keeping pace, patient, inevitable. I took every curve too fast, nearly spinning out on the slick asphalt. My mind was breaking, rational thoughts falling away as the night pressed in. Finally, I reached the main highway and called 911. I tried to explain what I had seen. The figures, the bodies, the black-eyed things emerging from the trees. The operator's voice was calm, but skeptical. "Sir, are you sure you're not just seeing things? It's been a long night. Maybe pull over somewhere safe and wait for the storm to pass." I wanted to scream at her, to make her understand, but my voice trembled uncontrollably. I took the next exit and found a small gas station, lights flickering weakly in the rain. The parking lot was empty, save for a few abandoned cars. I ran inside, dripping water all over the floor. Behind the counter was an old man, probably in his 70s, reading a newspaper. I demanded he call the police, explaining everything in a panicked rush. "You shouldn't be out there tonight," he said quietly. "They come out when it rains like this. People disappear all the time on these back roads." "Disappear?" I echoed, disbelief and terror mixing in my voice. "There are things out there, creatures, bodies. Something is hunting people." He didn't respond, just returned to his paper. I realized then that the gas station had no phone, no register, no way to communicate with the outside world. Just him, the flickering lights, and the storm outside. I ran back to my car, shaking, and drove onto the highway again. I didn't stop for hours. Every shadow on the side of the road, every flicker of movement made me flinch. Eventually, I reached a town, the streetlights and houses offering a thin layer of comfort. I pulled into a busy gas station and finally called the police. When they arrived, I led them to the road where the figures and bodies had appeared. There was nothing. No bodies, no signs of struggle, nothing but wet asphalt, broken branches, and the faint smell of iron. The officers were polite but dismissive. "Probably some prank or an accident that got cleaned up," one said. I didn't argue. No one could understand what I had seen. Even weeks later, the memory of those black-eyed figures, their unnatural movements, the twisting limbs, haunted me. I avoided the back roads completely, sticking only to well-lit highways. One night, weeks later, I was sitting on my porch when I heard scratching at the edge of my yard. At first, I thought it was a stray animal, but the sound was deliberate, almost rhythmic. My heart stopped. A figure emerged from the darkness, pale, wet eyes fixed on me. I ran inside, locking every door and window. The scratching continued, slow and methodical, circling the house. I called 911 again. The operator's voice was low and tense this time. I could hear it, a guttural, wet hum coming from outside. I pressed against the wall, heart hammering, listening as the sound moved around the house. I didn't dare look outside. Days turned into weeks. The scratching never fully stopped. Shadows lingered where light should reach. I installed cameras, locks, motion sensors, but the footage was always blank. Yet I could feel them watching, patient and inevitable. I knew I was not imagining it. I could feel their presence even through the walls, waiting for the moment I let my guard down. I've tried telling friends, family, coworkers. Most laughed it off, said I was stressed or imagining things. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. The twisted bodies, the black eyes, the patient waiting. They are real. They come out when it rains. They watch from the trees and the edges of back roads. They don't need to chase. They just wait. Even now, I avoid going out at night, especially when it rains. I drive only on main highways, never back roads. Every time I hear the rain on my roof, I feel them, their eyes following, patient, relentless. I cannot forget the wet scraping from the ditch, the figures emerging silently from the shadows, the twisted faces staring at me in the rain. I have come to accept that they will always be there. The patience is what terrifies me the most. They will wait for the next person, the next unlucky soul who strays too far from safety. I survived that night, but I know they never forget, and they never stop waiting. Story, the end. It was late October when I realized the night itself had turned against me. I had just started a job at a small, family-owned diner on the outskirts of a quiet town in Michigan. The diner's late-night shift ran from 4 p.m. to 11:30 p.m., and by the time I left, the streets were almost deserted. The highway home cut through dense forests, winding roads where headlights barely pierced the darkness. I wasn't unfamiliar with rural isolation. I grew up in cities, but this was different. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was oppressive. And that night, it became terrifying. I was driving my old Chevy, windshield streaked with rain, when I first saw the black sedan. At first, I thought it was another late-night commuter, a neighbor returning home, but then I noticed how it stayed just behind me, matching my every turn. Its engine hummed quietly, headlights dimmed. I glanced in the rearview mirror and felt my chest tighten. A tall figure sat in the driver's seat, head perfectly still, staring. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles white. I wanted to rationalize it, coincidence, exhaustion, but deep down I knew it wasn't normal. I reached my driveway and the car vanished. I told myself it was nothing, a random coincidence. But the next night, the same car was there again, parked down the street as I left work. When I accelerated, it followed, keeping the same distance, always present, silent and deliberate. That night, as I reached my driveway, a man stepped out. Tall, unnaturally thin, hood pulled low over his face. He didn't move toward me. He didn't speak. He just stared. Then, without warning, he turned and walked back to the car, drove off slowly. My body shook as I locked the door behind me, and sleep refused me. Over the next week, the black sedan became a constant. It appeared at the diner when I arrived, outside grocery stores, and once outside my friend's apartment. Sometimes it was parked just far enough away to avoid suspicion. Sometimes I saw him standing beside it, hands in pockets, watching. I stopped going out alone. I started carrying a knife and kept my phone in my hand whenever I left my apartment. Each time I caught sight of the figure, fear seized me in a way I had never known. It wasn't just fear, it was dread, the kind that clings to your skin and makes your muscles ache. Then came the notes. The first one slipped under my door, read, "I see you." The jagged letters seemed to pulse in the dim hallway light. My heart sank, and I locked every door, every window, and still couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I installed cheap security cameras, but they only confirmed what I already knew. The figure didn't always move. Sometimes it simply stood there, waiting, knowing I would eventually notice. Sleep became impossible. I would wake at all hours to the sound of footsteps outside my bedroom, the creak of floorboards, the hum of a car engine idling. I would lie awake, clutching my knife or baseball bat, straining to hear anything beyond my door. Shadows became threats. Even the wind brushing against my window sounded like someone approaching. Every sound was amplified, every moment a test of nerves I didn't think I had. One night I woke to the sound of my bedroom door handle rattling. Someone was trying it. I froze, heart pounding. I whispered, "Stay out," but the handle continued to twist slightly. My breath came in shallow gasps. Then the footsteps retreated. I didn't sleep again that night. I couldn't stay in my apartment anymore. I packed lightly and drove hundreds of miles seeking refuge in motels and friends' homes. But it followed, always at a distance. A black car in the shadows, a figure glimpsed at the corner of my vision. Sometimes I thought I was safe, but that feeling never lasted. It waited. Patient, deliberate, unyielding. Months passed, and paranoia became my constant companion. I never went out alone. I avoided highways, quiet neighborhoods, even certain streets in my city. I learned to check the reflections in windows, mirrors, puddles, and car doors. Every corner I turned, every alley I passed, I imagined it waiting, and often it was. Sometimes I would see a shadow move against the light, a glint of headlights, or the unmistakable silhouette of a tall man standing in the rain, always watching. One night, desperate, I checked into a cheap motel. I thought I could rest, finally, for a few hours, but as I lay in bed, I heard tapping at the window. Slow, deliberate. I froze, listening. Then faintly, I heard a scrape on the door. I didn't dare move. The window slid open slightly, then slammed shut with a soft thud. I didn't sleep. I didn't breathe. I started leaving towns as soon as I arrived. I became a ghost in my own country. Every new apartment, motel, friend's house, or rental home brought the same sensation. Someone or something was waiting, always patient, always silent. Its presence was enough to make my skin crawl, my stomach knot, my heart pound. It didn't attack, didn't speak, didn't need to. I couldn't hide from it, and I couldn't outpace it. The breaking point came months later in Detroit. I parked outside a 24-hour store to buy coffee, thinking a public place might help. I saw it. The figure standing in the parking lot, tall, thin, hooded, watching from the shadows. My knees went weak. I forced myself to move, pretending to be casual, but my chest was tight, every muscle screaming. When I turned, it was gone. I knew it hadn't disappeared. It had waited, patiently unseen. Years have passed, but the dread never left. I live out of hotels, rental houses, and friends' couches. I sleep with lights on, doors locked, windows reinforced. I never walk alone. I never go out at night. And still, I know it's out there, patient, watching, waiting for the moment I make a mistake. I've learned that the terror isn't in what it does, but in knowing it exists, that there is someone or something out there unyielding that will never forget me, never leave me, and is always, always patient. I live for the brief moments when it seems absent, but I know they are illusions. I will never be free. Story the end. It started the night I took the long drive home from work. I was a delivery driver for a small logistics company in rural Missouri, and the route I was on that night wasn't unusual. Just winding back roads cutting through fields and forests. I had driven them countless times in every type of weather, every hour of the day. But that night, the air was thick and heavy with fog, and the road seemed different. I remember noticing the way the fog swallowed the headlights of my truck, leaving only a short cone of visibility. The trees along the road looked like dark, jagged shadows reaching for me, and the silence was absolute, except for the hum of my engine and the occasional crunch of gravel under my tires. I had just passed an old farmhouse, long abandoned, when I saw him. At first, I thought it was a hitchhiker, a man standing in the middle of the road, motionless, hands at his sides. But as I got closer, something about him was wrong. He didn't move when I braked hard and swerved slightly to avoid him. His clothes were soaked, sticking to his thin frame, and his face, well, I couldn't see much through the fog, but the outline of it was wrong. Too elongated, too symmetrical. I honked, yelled, even flashed my high beams, but he didn't flinch. And then, just as I was passing, he was gone. No footprints in the mud, no sign he had moved. I slammed the brakes again and backed up slowly, scanning the fog, but the road behind me was empty. I told myself it was exhaustion, that the long hours, the monotonous roads were playing tricks on my mind. I shook it off, laughed nervously, and kept driving. But the unease didn't leave me. A few nights later, the incidents escalated. I was delivering to a warehouse on the outskirts of a small town. The lot was empty, the building dark, and the rain had started again, soft at first, then pounding. As I backed the truck into the loading bay, I noticed a figure in the shadows by the far corner of the lot. A man, again, just standing there. I called out, "You lost?" No answer. When I stepped out to check, he was gone. The lot was empty, but I could feel it, eyes on me. I chalked it up to paranoia, but something in my gut screamed that I wasn't imagining it. Then the calls started. My personal cell, my work phone, unknown numbers, static, then whispers. At first, they were faint, barely audible over the line. "Don't stop. Don't look back." I hung up every time, hoping it would end, but each night they came, louder, more insistent. Sometimes it wasn't even words, just breathing, heavy and wet. One night, after a delivery that ended just after midnight, I was driving home through a particularly isolated stretch of road. The fog was thicker than usual, the yellow lines on the asphalt barely visible. That's when I saw him again, standing by a broken fence, just watching. I swear I could see the blackness where his eyes should have been, reflecting nothing, absorbing the faint light from my headlights. I swerved instinctively, but something compelled me to stop. I rolled down the window slightly, and I heard a whisper carried on the wind, "You can't leave." I floored the gas and didn't stop until I reached my apartment. My hands were shaking, my pulse pounding. The next morning, I found scratches along the driver's side of my truck, deep, jagged. as if something had clawed at it, but there were no signs of a struggle, no footprints in the mud, nothing else. I started taking a different route to work, avoiding the back roads I usually drove, sticking to the highway as much as possible. But it didn't matter. The feeling followed me. Shadows in my peripheral vision that vanished when I turned my head. Strange noises in my apartment at night, scratches on the walls, whispers I couldn't place. One particularly bad night, I awoke to the sound of my front door creaking open. I live alone. My heart jumped into my throat as I reached for the baseball bat I kept by the bed. I peeked out and saw nothing. Then I heard it. Soft footsteps moving across the living room floor, slow and deliberate. I gripped the bat tighter, muscles tensed, waiting. The footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. I could feel it, the weight of its presence, like someone was pressing against the air around me. And then a whisper, right in my ear, though I was alone. "You can't hide." I swung the bat blindly, but there was nothing there. I backed into the corner of the room, trembling, until dawn broke and the sun finally cut through the night. I didn't sleep again that day. After that, I couldn't stay in the apartment. I stayed with friends, but even there, I felt watched. The whispers followed me, sometimes through calls or text messages that weren't sent by anyone I knew. Messages like, "You're not safe, you're mine." I moved again, across state lines to Ohio, thinking the distance would help. But the first night in the new apartment, the lights flickered and the whispers returned. Faint at first, then louder. I would wake in the middle of the night to find the bedroom door slightly ajar, even though I had locked it. I started documenting everything, recording audio and video, noting every strange occurrence. The footage often showed nothing unusual, shadows shifting in corners, shapes that didn't resolve. But sometimes if I left the camera running all night, I could see it. Standing at the edge of the frame, watching, tilting its head the way the man did on the road. I started seeing it in public places too, though I tried to convince myself it was coincidence. A figure standing at the edge of the parking lot at the grocery store, a shadow in the alley behind my apartment. Always the same, black eyes, elongated body, stillness. Watching. I can't sleep without lights on, and even then I feel it. Breathing, shifting, always waiting. I've tried therapy, medication, distraction. Nothing works. Moving doesn't work. Distance doesn't work. It's patient, intelligent, aware of every move I make. Sometimes I wake to find small scratches on my arms, messages carved faintly into the wood of my furniture. We know. The feeling never leaves. I have started carrying a flashlight and a bat everywhere. I check the locks constantly, yet I can never shake the sensation that it is inside, just beyond my perception, waiting for me to let my guard down. It has learned my routines. It knows when I am alone. It knows when I am asleep. It follows me in dreams, shaping itself into faces, shadows, figures that my mind can't quite comprehend. And when I wake, I feel it again. Always. I stopped calling friends and family about it. They would think I was losing my mind. But I am not. I know what I see, what I hear, what I feel. I have evidence, though it's subtle, shadows in videos, whispers in recordings, marks on walls that appear and disappear. I can't escape. I can't hide. It doesn't matter where I go. It doesn't matter how far or how fast. I have tried to confront it, but I tried to stay awake all night, tried to pray, tried to reason. Nothing works. The last time I tried to take a long drive to somewhere I had never been, I saw it standing at the side of the road, black eyes glinting in my headlights, unmoving, yet somehow closer than possible. I have learned to live with the fear. It's constant. It is always behind me, inside my apartment, outside my window, watching, waiting. The whispers are louder at night. The shadows stretch further, and I know it is only patient because I am alive. I write this not for help because I know help cannot reach me. I write this because someone somewhere may read it and understand. There are things out there, things that follow, watch, and whisper. They are patient. They are intelligent. They are relentless. I hear it now in the dark behind me as I type, breathing, waiting. It is closer than ever. Story the end. It was a Friday night in late October when I first noticed something strange on my way home. I had been working the night shift at a small grocery store in a town about 30 minutes outside of Pittsburgh. It wasn't glamorous work, just scanning, stocking, and making sure the place stayed clean, but it paid the bills. I usually left around 11:30, and the drive home was quiet. mostly empty highways winding through farmland and patches of woods. That night, the air was thick with humidity from a storm that had passed earlier, and the road was slick with rain. I remember thinking it was too quiet, the kind of silence that presses in and makes you hyper-aware of every sound. My headlights picked up a figure standing at the edge of the woods along the shoulder of the road. At first, I thought it was a hitchhiker or someone stranded, but as I got closer, I realized it was a woman. Pale, thin, wearing a soaked white dress that clung to her body. Her hair hung in front of her face, and she stood unnaturally still, staring straight ahead. I slowed instinctively, but she didn't move as I passed. When I glanced in the rearview mirror, she was gone. I chalked it up to my imagination. It was late, I was tired, and the storm had left the air heavy and strange. The next night, she was there again, in the same spot. This time, I slowed more. Heart racing. When I looked directly at her, I could finally see her eyes, and something about them made my stomach drop. They were completely black. Not a shadow or a trick of the light, but fully black, empty, endless. I slammed the gas, tires skidding on the wet asphalt, and didn't stop until I pulled into my driveway. My house was small, on a quiet street, backed by trees, and normally comforting. That night, it felt suffocating. Rex, my dog, a mutt with way too much energy, was unusually quiet, sitting rigid by the door, ears perked, growling low whenever I moved. I locked all the doors, checked the windows, and tried to sleep, but every sound, every creak of the old house, every gust of wind made me flinch. Over the next few nights, things escalated. Footsteps outside my house, slow and deliberate, items in my kitchen and living room slightly moved or out of place, and then the knocking began. 3 sharp raps on the front door, always around 2 a.m., never louder, never softer, just deliberate. I tried ignoring it, locking myself in the living room with every light on, but it never stopped. "You saw me," the voice said one night, soft and calm, almost polite, but wrong. I froze, heart hammering, Rex growling at the door. The sound came from nowhere and everywhere at once, impossible to locate, impossible to escape. Sleep became impossible. I started noticing shadows where there shouldn't be any, reflections in windows that vanished when I turned to look. I started driving to work early, leaving the house before dark and returning long after sunrise, but even then, I felt it, like a weight pressing just beyond my vision, following me. One night, I woke to the sound of my bedroom window sliding open. I don't know how it happened. The locks were intact, the glass undisturbed, but there it was, moving. Rex barked frantically, hair standing on end, but the sound was quiet compared to the thing I felt in the room. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. Footsteps across the living room, slow, heavy, dragging. The whisper returned. "You can't hide." I grabbed the bat I kept by the bed and backed against the wall. Hours passed with nothing visible, nothing tangible, just the sounds, the pressure, the whispering that seemed to follow me wherever I went in the house. The police were called once, after weeks of escalating events, but they found nothing. No footprints, no evidence, no trace of anyone having been inside or around the property. They suggested stress, overwork, or sleep deprivation. I thanked them, but I knew the truth. I had seen her eyes. The days blurred. I stopped leaving the house entirely after dark. I barely ate. Work suffered. Friends drifted away when I refused invitations or calls. I installed cameras, alarms, motion sensors, but every time the event occurred, the electronics would fail, lights flickering, cameras going offline. My only constant companion was Rex, who never left my side. One night during a power outage, I sat in the living room, knife in hand, Rex trembling at my feet. The tapping started immediately, followed by the whisper, "I know where you are. I see you." I stayed there all night. By morning, the power returned, the lights flickered back, and the house seemed normal. The scratches that had appeared on the doors and windowsills disappeared as if erased. But the feeling remained. Heavy. Pressing. I knew it hadn't gone, hadn't stopped, hadn't forgotten me. I moved a week later, packed what I could into my car, and left everything else behind. The nightmares continued. Shadows in the corner of rooms, tapping on windows, whispers in the night, repeating those same words, "You saw me." Even now, in a new house, far from the back roads and rain-soaked highways of that town, I hear the faint taps on the glass when the wind blows just right. I tell myself it's my imagination, but I know the truth. I saw her eyes, and she hasn't forgotten me. Story, the end. It started on a night so ordinary that I didn't think anything unusual could happen. Um, I was driving back from my second late night shift at a diner in upstate Pennsylvania, a small town so isolated that by the time the last customer left, the streets were empty and the only sound was the hum of my tires on the wet asphalt. Rain was falling steadily, the kind that made the headlights shimmer and the road reflect the orange glow of distant streetlights. I was exhausted, my body aching from standing for 12 hours, but I didn't mind. I liked the solitude of the drive. It gave me time to think. I was about 15 miles from my apartment when I noticed a car in my rearview mirror. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Late at night, cars occasionally followed the same route, but as I drove, it didn't pass me, didn't turn off. It stayed there, trailing me, headlights dim, engine quiet. I tried to focus on the road, telling myself it was coincidence, but something in my gut twisted uncomfortably. I increased my speed slightly. The car mirrored me. I took a sharp turn onto a side road, hoping to lose it. The car followed. My heart began pounding, cold sweat forming along my spine. I wanted to call someone, but the signal was weak in this area. The road narrowed, flanked by thick woods on either side. Rain-slicked branches scraped the roof of my car as I navigated the curves. Suddenly, the car turned on its bright lights. My eyes burned against them. Through the windshield, I could make out a figure inside, tall, thin, unnaturally still, staring directly at me. There was no reaction when I honked, no blinking, no movement. Just the figure, motionless, with a presence that seemed to press down on me. Panic set in. I floored the accelerator, tires squealing on wet asphalt. The black sedan stayed with me, keeping a calculated distance, as if waiting for the exact right moment. I glanced at my speedometer, 70 miles per hour, and realized I had no idea how long I had been on this road. Minutes felt like hours. At one point, I tried pulling over, pretending to check the tire. My heart hammered in my chest as I watched through the rearview mirror. The sedan slowed behind me, engine humming, then continued to follow when I resumed driving. I felt trapped, like a mouse in a maze, and I didn't know where the exit was. Finally, I reached a stretch of road that sloped downward, leading to a bridge over a dark creek. The road was narrow, barely wide enough for two cars to pass. My car sputtered slightly, fuel light flashing. I was terrified, thinking I might stall. The figure appeared on the bridge ahead of me, standing in the middle of the lane. I slammed on the brakes, heart in my throat. It didn't move. It didn't run. It just stood there, its outline visible in the faint glow of the headlights. Impossibly tall and thin. I froze, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The rain pelted my windshield, hiding the details of the figure, but I could sense it was looking at me, studying me, calculating. Something inside me snapped. I threw the car into reverse, tires screeching, then spun around and drove as fast as I could back down the road I had come from. The sedan followed. I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror anymore. I didn't need to. I could feel it. By some miracle, I reached the edge of town. Streetlights appeared and the black sedan slowed, then vanished into the darkness. I pulled into my apartment driveway, trembling so badly I could barely reach the door. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I told myself it was a hallucination. Exhaustion, stress, maybe even the isolation. I tried rationalizing everything. But the black sedan appeared again that evening, parked at a distance outside the diner. I tried to act normal, hoping nobody inside would notice my pallor or shaking hands. As days went on, the sightings increased. The car appeared at the grocery store, outside my friend's apartment, even once parked along a side street as I drove by. Always at a distance, always the same tall, thin figure inside. Sometimes it moved slowly, gliding as if it were floating. I began carrying a knife in my jacket pocket, feeling increasingly paranoid. I avoided being alone, even at home. Then the notes started. The first one was slipped under my apartment door, written in jagged black letters, "I see you." My heart sank. I had locked every door, every window. There was no way anyone could have gotten inside. Yet here was proof that someone or something was observing me, waiting for me to realize I wasn't safe. Sleep became impossible. Every creak, every sound outside my apartment became a threat. Floorboards groaning, the hum of distant traffic, even the wind through the trees. I would wake multiple times a night, flashlight in hand, scanning every corner. Sometimes I thought I saw shadows move in the corners of my eyes, but when I turned to look, there was nothing. I tried calling the police once. They were polite but dismissive, suggesting I stay with friends for a while or that perhaps I was overworked and stressed. I knew they wouldn't understand. This was real. I was being hunted, and no one would believe me. Months passed, and I became a ghost in my own life. I moved from apartment to apartment, motel to motel, always keeping a careful watch. I never stayed in one place longer than a few weeks. The black sedan followed, sometimes at a distance, sometimes visible in reflections, sometimes completely gone. It didn't need to attack, it only needed to exist. Its presence was enough to terrorize me. One night, desperate, I rented a cheap room in a 24-hour motel. I thought I might finally rest. I locked the door, checked the windows, and climbed into bed. Hours later, I woke to tapping at the window. Slow, deliberate, each tap making my blood run cold. I didn't move. The tapping continued, then stopped. Moments later, the door handle rattled softly. My heart pounded. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I began carrying a flashlight, knife, and baseball bat everywhere. I learned to check reflections in mirrors, windows, and puddles. Every sound, every shadow became a signal. I never went outside alone. I avoided back roads and alleys. Even during the day, I felt it. I could sense it waiting. Patient. Calculating. Unyielding. Years have passed. I've moved dozens of times. I live constantly alert, sleeping with lights on, doors locked, windows reinforced. I never stay in one place too long. I never leave without checking behind me. I've learned that the fear isn't in what it does, but in knowing it exists. That there is someone, or something, watching, waiting for the moment I make a mistake. It doesn't need to approach to terrify me. Its patience is enough. Its presence is enough. And I know that someday, if I let my guard down for even a second, it will catch me. Until then, I exist in constant vigilance, a life half lived in fear, always aware that it is out there, waiting. Story the end. It was just past midnight when I realized something was wrong. I had left my job at the convenience store in rural Kentucky later than usual, the storm clouds pressing down on the small town like a living weight. Rain was falling in sheets, bouncing off the empty streets, and the fluorescent lights of the gas station I had just left flickered in the downpour. My car was an old sedan with a windshield wiper that squeaked and missed spots, making visibility even worse. Normally, I would have taken the highway, but the storm had flooded portions of it, and I opted for the back roads instead, a decision I would regret immediately. The road twisted and turned through thick woods, and the headlights barely cut through the darkness. The rain-slicked asphalt reflected the trees like a distorted mirror, every shadow seeming to move when I wasn't looking. I had driven this route countless times, but tonight, every familiar curve and bend felt alien. The forest seemed to lean in, branches tapping against the roof of my car like skeletal fingers. I first noticed something out of the ordinary when a figure appeared at the edge of the road. At first, I thought it was a hitchhiker, but as I drew closer, I realized it was standing completely still, facing me, drenched from head to toe. Its posture was rigid, unnaturally so, and its head tilted in a way that didn't seem human. My heart pounded as I slowed the car, bracing to stop. Then its face came into view under my headlights, and my stomach dropped. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and the eyes, oh God, the eyes, they were black, completely black, reflecting no light. The figure didn't move, didn't blink, didn't react at all. I jerked the wheel and swerved into the ditch to avoid it. The car skidded across mud and water, throwing my heart into my throat. When I looked back, the figure had vanished. I tried to rationalize it. I told myself my imagination was playing tricks because I was tired and stressed, that maybe the figure had been a trick of the fog or a coat hanging from a tree. But a gnawing dread had already settled into my chest. The air itself seemed heavier, thicker, and I could feel a presence, unseen yet oppressive, pressing down on me from the trees lining the road. About a mile further, I saw another figure, closer this time, standing right in the middle of the road. My brakes screamed as I slammed on them, tires skidding, rain pounding against the windshield. I realized that this one was moving toward me, or maybe the road was moving beneath it. I couldn't tell. The figure's limbs were twisted, bent in ways that no human should be able to bend. Its head jerked to follow my movements, eyes still black, unblinking. I swerved hard, barely missing it, and my car went off the road again, sliding through a ditch and coming to a stop against a fallen branch. I sat frozen, heart hammering, sweat mixing with rain on my skin, and then I heard it. A low, wet scraping sound, like fingernails on metal, coming from the ditch beside my car. My flashlight flickered as I grabbed it and I shined it toward the sound. My breath caught in my throat. A body, or something resembling one, was crawling out of the mud, twisted in ways that defied all logic. Limbs bent backward, torso contorted, and yet it moved with purpose, eyes locked on me. Its mouth opened, and I thought I could hear a wet, gurgling sound, though the rain should have drowned out any noise. I ran back to my car, fumbling with the keys, fingers slipping on the wet metal. My mind was screaming at me to leave, to get as far away as possible. I started the engine and slammed the car into gear, headlights cutting through the fog, praying I could escape. But when I glanced in the rearview mirror, dozens of figures emerged from the trees, gliding silently onto the road. They didn't run, they didn't chase in a conventional sense. They simply followed, patient, inevitable, their eyes fixed on me. I drove like a man possessed, tires hydroplaning over the slick asphalt, weaving through the shadows. Every turn I took, I thought I lost them, but they reappeared at the edge of the headlights, waiting for me. Panic consumed me, and rational thought fled. I knew that if I slowed even for a second, I would be overtaken. Eventually, I reached the main highway and tried calling 911. My voice trembled as I explained the figures, the twisted bodies, the black eyes that seemed to pierce my soul. The operator was calm but skeptical. "Sir, are you sure you're not just seeing things? It's a stormy night, and you've been driving for hours. Maybe pull over somewhere safe and wait it out." I wanted to scream to make her understand, but I could barely form words. I took the next exit and found a small gas station, lights weak against the rain. The parking lot was empty, save for a few abandoned cars. I ran inside, shivering, water dripping across the linoleum floor. Behind the counter was an old man, probably in his 70s, reading a newspaper. I demanded he call the police, explaining everything in a jumble of panic and disbelief. "You shouldn't be out there tonight," he said quietly. "They come out when it rains like this. People disappear on these roads all the time." "Disappear?" I echoed, my chest tightening. "There are things out there, creatures, bodies. Something is hunting people." He didn't answer, just went back to his newspaper. I realized then that there was no phone behind the counter, no register, nothing. Just him, the flickering lights, and the storm outside. I ran back to my car, shaking violently, and drove onto the highway again. I didn't stop for hours. Every shadow on the side of the road, every flicker of movement made me flinch. Even when I reached a more populated area, I felt their presence lingering behind me. Weeks passed, but the memory didn't fade. I avoided back roads entirely, sticking to main highways, never driving at night if I could help it. Then one evening, weeks later, I was sitting on my porch when I heard scratching at the edge of my yard. At first, I thought it was a stray animal, but the sound was deliberate, rhythmic. My heart froze. A figure emerged from the darkness, pale, wet, eyes fixed on me. I bolted inside, locking every door and window. The scratching continued, slow and methodical, circling the house. I called 911 again, voice shaking. The operator's tone was low and tense this time. I could hear it, a guttural, wet hum coming from outside. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering, listening as the sound moved around the house. I didn't dare look out the windows. Days turned into weeks. The scratching never fully stopped. Shadows lingered just beyond the reach of light. I installed cameras, locks, and motion sensors, but the footage always came back blank. Yet I could feel them watching, patient and inevitable. I knew I wasn't imagining it. Their patience was what terrified me most. They would wait, and one day if I let my guard down, they would get me. I've tried warning friends, family, coworkers. Most laughed it off, said I was stressed or imagining things. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. The twisted bodies, the black eyes, the patient waiting, they are real. They come out when it rains. They watch from the trees and the edges of back roads. They don't need to chase. They just wait. Even now, I avoid back roads entirely. I drive only on main highways, never go out at night when it rains. Every time I hear rain pattering on my roof, I feel their presence. I can still hear the wet scraping from the ditch, see the figures gliding silently from the shadows, their black eyes fixed on me in the rain. They are patient. They are inevitable. and they will wait for the next unlucky soul who strays too far into the dark. I survived that night, but I know they never forget. Story the end. It was the kind of night where the wind didn't just blow, it seemed to push against your body, bending the trees like they were nothing more than paper. I was driving home from a late shift at a diner in rural Tennessee, the kind of place where the streets are empty, the neon signs flicker lazily, and the only sound at night is the occasional train whistle in the distance. I liked the quiet, the solitude. I liked the roads that twisted through the woods, of the dark patches where even the moonlight seemed hesitant to enter. That night, though, the darkness felt heavier. I had just passed an old service station on the side of the road when I noticed a figure standing under the dim light of a broken street lamp. At first, I thought it was a hitchhiker, one of the rare souls wandering late at night in these parts. But as I got closer, the figure didn't move. It just stood there, hands at its sides, head tilted in a way that seemed unnatural. I slowed down, squinting through the rain splattering my windshield. The face was obscured, but I could make out eyes, pitch black, reflecting no light. I slammed on the brakes, my tires screeching against the wet asphalt. When I looked again, the figure was gone. No footprints in the muddy shoulder, no sign of movement. Nothing. I laughed nervously, blaming exhaustion and the long hours behind the wheel. I didn't tell anyone at work. Who would believe it? The next few nights were uneventful, or so I thought. But the feeling didn't leave me. Driving those back roads, I kept noticing shadows just at the edge of my vision, shapes that seemed to follow, then vanish when I turned my head. At the diner, I began hearing faint whispers behind the counter, almost imperceptible, repeating the same words over and over. You shouldn't be here. I chalked it up to stress. Then came the phone calls. My personal phone, my work phone, unknown numbers, static, then low, raspy breathing. Sometimes words, sometimes just the sound of something moving, wet and deliberate. I started leaving my phone in another room, but the calls found me anyway. One night, after a delivery in the next town over, I was driving back along a narrow country road when I saw him again. Standing in the middle of the road, head tilted unnaturally, black eyes catching the dim light of my headlights. I slammed on the brakes and swerved to the shoulder, heart pounding. When I looked back, the figure was gone. The road was empty, the trees motionless. I tried to tell myself it was a hallucination, a trick of the fog and rain, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. I began sleeping with all the lights on, doors locked, checking the windows constantly. But at night, I would wake to find the front door slightly ajar, scratches along the floorboards, marks on the walls. I started documenting everything, audio recording, security cameras, even taking notes on what I felt and saw. But the evidence was subtle, shadows shifting in corners, whispers that only appeared on playback as faint static, marks that vanished by morning. Yet the presence was real, heavy, suffocating, patient, watching. Weeks passed. The figure appeared more often, sometimes outside my apartment, sometimes on the road, sometimes inside. The black eyes, the tilted head, the unnatural stillness. And always the whispers in my head now, not just over the phone. You can't hide. You can't leave. I stopped leaving my apartment alone. Friends would drop by, but I didn't tell them what was happening. They wouldn't understand. They'd call me paranoid, insane. But I wasn't. I could feel it in the shadows, in the silence, pressing against me in ways that made sleep impossible. I moved. I tried leaving town, driving hundreds of miles away, thinking distance might break it. But it followed. On the highway in Kentucky, I saw the same figure standing by the roadside, watching as I drove past. The black eyes reflected nothing, absorbed everything. The whisper followed, carried by the wind, you can't escape. I tried confronting it. One night I stayed awake, bat in hand, lights blazing. The air turned cold, the shadows deepened, and I saw him glide across the floor, impossibly fast. I swung, hit nothing, and felt the oppressive weight of it pressing closer. The whispers became louder, overlapping, chaotic, and then silence. By morning, everything in my apartment was untouched, except for the words scratched into my nightstand, "We know." Sleep became impossible. I began sleeping in shifts, leaving lights on constantly, recording audio and video. The figure appeared in recordings occasionally, shadows that moved unnaturally, forms at the edge of the frame. I could hear whispers, faint, insistent, always warning, you shouldn't be here, you can't leave, we are watching. I have tried therapy, medication, friends, family, distractions. None of it helps. The presence is patient, intelligent, aware of every movement, every breath. I feel it when I'm alone, when I'm in public, when I'm driving. The black eyes follow me everywhere. One night, I woke to my bedroom door open, though I had locked it. The room was dark, but I could feel the presence just beyond the bed. Breathing. Waiting. I swung my flashlight around and I caught a glimpse of him in the corner. The elongated figure, black eyes, twisted head. I don't know how long he stood there. I just know he was watching. I ran out of the apartment, drove all night until the sun rose. I thought maybe movement would break it. But even in daylight, the feeling never left. Shadows lingered at the edges of my vision, whispers carried on the wind. You can't hide. You can't escape. You shouldn't be here. I have moved multiple times across state lines, thinking distance would help. But it doesn't. It's patient. It's intelligent. It knows routines, habits, vulnerabilities. I've learned not to fight it, not to confront, just to endure. And even then, the whispers, the shadows, the black eyes, they follow. I write this now because someone needs to know. There are things out there, entities that watch, wait, and whisper. They are patient. They are relentless. And when they find you, they will not let go. I hear it now, in the dark behind me, breathing, waiting. I cannot turn. I cannot confront. I cannot escape. It is patient, and it always wins. Story the end. It started on a rainy Thursday night in late September, just after midnight. I was driving home from my second shift at a small factory on the outskirts of a town in rural Ohio. The roads were empty, slick with rain, and lined with trees that reached over the pavement like dark, grasping hands. My Honda's headlights barely cut through the fog that hung over the asphalt, and I found myself gripping the wheel tighter as the wind rattled the car. I had taken this route 100 times before, but that night, something felt off. I first noticed it about 20 minutes into the drive. A figure standing at the edge of the road, a woman, pale, drenched from the rain, hair clinging to her face. At first, I thought it was someone hitchhiking, someone stranded in the storm. My heart pounded, but I slowed, leaning forward in my seat. As I got closer, her face came into view, and I froze. Black eyes. Not the dark brown of shadowed pupils, but fully black, like pits that absorb the light. She didn't move. She didn't blink. She just stood there, staring. I slammed on the gas and didn't look back until I was miles past where I had seen her. When I did glance in the rearview mirror, she wasn't there. My pulse thumped in my ears and I drove faster than I ever had before. By the time I got to my small apartment, I was shaking, drenched in rain, and convinced I had imagined it. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. The following nights I avoided that road, taking longer routes home, but the feeling followed me. I started seeing her in fleeting glimpses, reflections in store windows, standing on the sidewalk when I passed by, just outside the edges of my vision. Each time, the same black eyes, the same wet, clinging hair, the same white dress. I tried to tell myself it was stress. My job was exhausting, the hours long, the factory loud and grueling, but the dreams started as well. Vivid nightmares, where I was driving the same road, headlights cutting through the darkness, and she was always closer, always in the middle of the road, blocking my path. Sometimes she was in my apartment, standing in the corner of my bedroom, watching me sleep. I would wake in a cold sweat, heart hammering, and Rex, my dog, would be growling low at the shadows. One night, after the dreams had continued for a week, I woke to a sound I can't describe, the slow, deliberate scraping of nails against wood. It came from my front door. Rex barked violently, but I froze, unable to move. Then I heard the whisper, "Let me in." It was soft, patient, almost casual, but it froze the blood in my veins. I stayed in bed, clutching a baseball bat, listening. The sound didn't stop for what felt like hours. By dawn, it had vanished, and I was left trembling, drenched in sweat. The following days were a blur. I stopped sleeping, barely eating, avoiding leaving the apartment after dark. I called the police once after hearing footsteps pacing the hallway outside my door, but when they came, they found nothing. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, nothing. I tried to explain the black eyes, the whispering, the tapping, but I couldn't. They looked at me like I was insane. It escalated. The tapping at the windows became pounding. The whispers grew into full sentences, always the same. "You saw me. You can't hide. You're mine now." I set up cameras around the apartment, motion sensors, alarms. Every night they failed. Lights flickered, batteries died, cameras went offline just when the sound started. Rex stayed close, growling and trembling, the only witness I had to confirm the events were real. One night during a storm, the power went out entirely. The apartment plunged into total darkness. I had a flashlight and a bat, but it barely helped. The pounding at the windows started immediately, followed by the whisper, now in my ear, soft but unmistakable, "I'm inside." I didn't believe it at first. I ran through every room, checking doors and windows. Everything was locked, bolted, secure. But the feeling of presence didn't leave. It pressed against my skin, cold and heavy. Rex whimpered and pressed closer to me, but even he seemed to sense the impossibility. Hours passed in darkness, filled with sounds I can't fully describe. The shuffle of feet across floors, the whispering, the tapping that became almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat in the walls themselves. By the time dawn came, the apartment appeared normal. Nothing was disturbed, no footprints, no marks, no scratches. But I knew it hadn't left. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. I barely ate. I started drinking to calm the nerves, but it didn't help. Each night, the same sounds returned, the same whispering, the same black-eyed figure. Sometimes I would catch a glimpse in reflective surfaces, windows, mirrors, but as soon as I turned, she was gone. Always watching, always waiting. Finally, I made a decision. I packed my car, grabbed Rex, and left everything behind. Furniture, clothes, my life, all left in the apartment. I drove hours away, settling in a new town in the Midwest, a place with lights, traffic, and people around. For a while, it seemed to help. I started sleeping again, slowly, though nightmares never completely stopped. Shadows at the corners of rooms, fleeting glimpses of black eyes, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. Months passed, but the fear never left. I still hear tapping sometimes, faint, distant on my windows at night. Rex has grown quieter, more tense during storms, and I can feel it in my chest. The weight of something watching. I've never returned to that apartment. I've never driven that back road. But I know she's out there, patient, waiting, watching. Sometimes late at night when the wind is right, I swear I hear her whisper my name, soft and deliberate just beyond hearing. And I know that one day she'll come back for me. Story the end. It was a cold November night when I first realized that something was wrong with the world around me. I had just finished my shift at the diner, a small place on the outskirts of a town in rural Pennsylvania. The roads back to my apartment were dark and winding, lined with dense woods that seemed to close in around my car as I drove. It had been raining all day, turning the pavement slick and reflective, and the occasional tree branch rattled against my windshield with the wind. I had driven this route hundreds of times before, but that night, the familiar comfort of the drive felt foreign, threatening. About 20 minutes from home, I noticed a car following me. At first, I assumed it was coincidence, another night traveler, but as I glanced in the rearview mirror, unease settled in my stomach. The headlights stayed at the same distance behind me, mirroring my every move. When I took a turn to stay on the main road, the car followed precisely. I felt a pulse of fear, quick and icy. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just someone headed the same way, but the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. The black sedan had no distinguishing marks. Its headlights were dim, almost subdued, and the rain glimmered against its windshield like a sheet of moving glass. I tried increasing my speed, but it matched me turn for turn. My hands trembled on the wheel, knuckles white as I gripped it tighter. My mind raced, thinking of all the news stories I had ever read about people being followed late at night, about the unexplainable disappearances that sometimes happened in these areas. Panic began to build. I considered calling the police, but my cell signal was weak in this rural stretch. My thoughts became frantic. I needed to get to safety, but where? My apartment was only a few miles away, yet the thought of reaching it felt impossible. The road narrowed, trees leaning over the asphalt, branches scraping against my car. Every shadow seemed to twitch and move, my imagination feeding off the storm around me. Suddenly, the black sedan turned on its high beams. I shielded my eyes, and when I glanced again in the rearview mirror, I saw a figure inside. A tall, thin silhouette, sitting perfectly still in the driver's seat, head tilted slightly, staring directly at me. There was no expression, no movement, just that unnerving gaze. My stomach lurched, and I slammed my foot on the accelerator, tires screaming on the wet road. I tried to shake it by taking a detour through side streets I barely knew. The car followed, as if it could anticipate my moves. I drove with a hyper-awareness of every turn, every possible escape, but it stayed with me. Quiet, relentless. My heart thumped violently, my breathing ragged as I forced myself to focus on the road. At one point, I considered pulling over and confronting it, but instinct screamed at me not to. Finally, I reached a small bridge that spanned a creek. The rain had made it slippery, and I slowed down. That's when I saw the figure standing in the middle of the bridge. Not just inside the car this time, but on the road itself. Its height was unnatural, its frame impossibly thin, almost skeletal. I froze. My instincts screamed to reverse, but the narrow bridge gave me no room. The figure didn't move toward me. It didn't blink or make any gesture. It simply existed, and that presence alone filled me with dread. I reversed as carefully as I could, tires skidding slightly on the slick road. The figure stepped aside, almost casually, allowing me to pass. My adrenaline spiked, and I floored the gas pedal, racing back toward the main road. When I finally reached the edge of town, the figure and the car were gone. I pulled into my driveway, trembling, unable to comprehend what had just happened. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every shadow in my apartment seemed alive. Every creak of the floorboards sent jolts of panic through me. Over the next few days, the sightings continued. The black sedan appeared outside the diner during my shift, parked at a distance, engine off, silhouette visible behind the glass. I saw it once at a grocery store, by its headlights catching me as I exited with a cart. Each time, the same figure, motionless, observing. It wasn't aggressive yet, but the intent to terrorize was clear. I started carrying a small knife at all times, keeping my phone ready to call for help, but deep down, I knew no one would believe me. Then, the notes appeared. The first one was slipped under my apartment door, written in jagged black letters, "I see you." My blood ran cold. The apartment was locked, windows reinforced, yet the note had appeared. I double-checked every lock, every window, convinced I was losing my mind. Sleep became impossible. Each creak, each gust of wind became a threat. I couldn't distinguish reality from imagination anymore. Weeks passed, and the figure continued to haunt me. I moved, trying to escape, but it followed. Whether I stayed in motels, friends' houses, or temporary apartments, the presence was there, always at a distance, always observing. I became a ghost in my own life, avoiding streets at night, never leaving alone, constantly checking over my shoulder. My paranoia escalated, and my world shrank to a constant state of vigilance. The breaking point came months later. I was staying in a small motel in a different state, hoping the distance would help. I locked myself in the room, bolted the door, and tried to rest. Hours later, a tapping at the window woke me. Slow, deliberate, echoing in the stillness of the night. My flashlight revealed nothing, but the sense of being watched was overwhelming. Then came the sound of the door handle rattling softly, almost mockingly. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Dawn couldn't come fast enough. Years have passed, but the dread never left me. I live constantly alert, moving frequently, sleeping with lights on, doors locked, and windows reinforced. I avoid being alone at all costs. Even now, the sensation of being watched haunts me, a shadow lingering at the edges of my life. The figure never attacked, never spoke, yet it defined my existence. It was patient, deliberate, and unyielding. I know in the deepest part of me that it waits for the moment I slip, the instant I let my guard down. It doesn't need to chase me to terrify me. Its mere presence is enough. The knowledge that it is out there, always patient, always watching, fills every part of my life with tension. I live for the brief moments when it seems absent, knowing they are illusions. I will never be free. Story the end. It started on a Thursday night, just after midnight. I was driving home from my second shift at a warehouse on the outskirts of a small Ohio town. The kind of town where everyone knows each other's business, but no one really cares. The roads were slick from rain, slick enough that the yellow lines blurred beneath my headlights. The trees leaned over the pavement, branches swaying in the wind, casting shadows that twisted like hands, reaching out. I'd driven this route dozens of times before, but that night the isolation pressed down on me like a weight. About 15 minutes from home, I noticed a figure standing on the side of the road. At first, I thought it was someone stranded, maybe waiting for a ride. A woman, tall and thin, drenched, hair plastered to her face and shoulders. She wore a long, white dress that clung to her body. My chest tightened as I slowed, instinctively gripping the wheel tighter, but she didn't move. Her face came into view and my stomach dropped. Her eyes were black, fully black, like empty pits staring into mine. I slammed on the gas, tires slipping on the wet asphalt, and didn't look back. When I finally caught sight in the rearview mirror, she was gone. I told myself it was a trick of the storm, of the streetlights. I tried to forget it, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave. The next night I drove home earlier, trying to avoid that stretch of road, but the longer routes didn't help. I kept seeing shadows, fleeting movements at the edge of my vision, reflections in windows that vanished when I turned my head. My apartment felt smaller, tighter, like the walls themselves were pressing in. The first thing I noticed inside was Rex. He's a mutt, usually hyper and excitable, but that night he refused to leave the corner of the living room. Low growl, rumbling in his throat, hair standing on end. I tried to ignore it, but then I heard it, tapping, soft at first, deliberate, on the front window. I froze, heart hammering. "Let me in," a voice whispered. It was low, patient, casual, but wrong. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I just stayed in the living room, bat in hand, listening. The tapping went on for hours, stopping only as the first gray light of dawn touched the sky. Sleep didn't come that night, nor the next, nor the next. I stopped leaving the apartment after dark. I barely ate. Work suffered. Friends drifted away when I refused calls or invitations. I set up cameras, motion sensors, alarms. Every night they failed. Batteries died. Lights flickered. Cameras went offline the moment the sound started. Rex stayed close, the only witness to confirm what I could not explain. The whispering escalated into full sentences, threats I could feel pressing on my chest, filling the room like smoke. "You saw me. You can't hide. You're mine now." One night, the power went out entirely. My apartment plunged into darkness, and the tapping began immediately, followed by the whisper, "I'm inside." I didn't believe it. I checked every door, every window, every lock. Everything was secure. Yet the presence was undeniable, pressing, suffocating. The sound of footsteps pacing, scraping across the floors, moving closer, then retreating, repeating endlessly. Rex whimpered at my side, shaking, eyes wide. I stayed in the kitchen with my bat, flashlight in hand, listening until dawn. By morning, everything appeared normal. The scratches that had appeared along doors and windows vanished as if erased. But the weight remained. I knew she had been there. I knew she hadn't left. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. I barely ate. I started drinking just to calm the nerves, but it didn't help. Every night the tapping returned. Every night the whispering. Every night her black eyes in fleeting glimpses at the edges of my vision. Mirrors, windows, any reflective surface, there she was, watching, always watching. Finally, I made a decision. I packed my car, grabbed Rex, and left everything behind. Furniture, clothes, my life. I drove hundreds of miles away, settling in a town bustling enough to drown out the silence. Lights everywhere, people moving, noise that filled the gaps in my senses. For a while it helped. Sleep returned, though nightmares still crept in. Shadows at the corners, fleeting glimpses of black eyes, whispers echoing just beyond hearing. Months passed. I tried to convince myself I was safe, that it had ended. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind is right, I hear the tapping on the window. A soft, deliberate rhythm, and I swear I feel it again, the weight of her presence, patient, waiting, watching. Even now, in a new house far from that road, that town, I can't forget. The black eyes. The voice, the taps on the glass that aren't there in the daylight. I tell myself it's my imagination, but deep down I know the truth. She saw me, she's still out there, and one day she'll come back. Story the end. It was late October when I first realized something wasn't right about the house I had rented. I had moved to a small town in Pennsylvania for a job at a local newspaper, excited for a quieter life away from the city. The house itself seemed perfect at first glance. 2 stories, brick siding, a small yard, quiet street. Cheap rent too, which I reasoned would help me save. I didn't know then that it would be a mistake that would haunt me. The first night, everything seemed normal. I unpacked, made a simple dinner, and fell asleep exhausted. But around 2 in the morning, I woke to a faint tapping sound. It was light, irregular, coming from the direction of the kitchen window. I thought it might be the wind or a loose branch hitting the glass, but the sound stopped as soon as I sat up. My first night's unease I brushed off as nerves. By the third night, the tapping had become more deliberate. 3 sharp raps, a pause, then 2 slower ones. I stayed awake, trying to trace the sound, but the night was silent beyond the occasional hum of the heater. I began to notice other things. Dishes stacked oddly, my keys in a different spot than I had left them, a faint smell of damp soil that wasn't there during the day. I tried telling myself I was imagining things, attributing it to stress from the move and the new job. Then I saw him. It was just past midnight. I had woken to use the bathroom when I caught a shadow moving in the corner of the living room. At first, I thought it was my imagination again, but the shadow was tall, thin, and impossibly still. I turned on the light and froze. A man was standing there, completely motionless, his black eyes staring directly at me. There was no expression, no movement, just the unrelenting gaze. My heart skipped a beat, and I stumbled back toward the kitchen, grabbing the largest knife I could find. When I turned back, he was gone. Nothing remained, no footprints, no sound, nothing. Sleep became nearly impossible. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind against the siding felt like someone walking past the window. I began sleeping in the living room with every light on, the doors locked, knife within reach. My dog, Rex, refused to leave my side, growling at empty corners, fur bristled. I called the police once after hearing him pacing outside my front door. They sent an officer who walked the perimeter, found nothing, and advised me to consider stress and exhaustion. I thanked him, but I knew what I had seen. I knew it wasn't a figment of my imagination. The presence became more intrusive. Items would be moved while I wasn't looking. Doors would be ajar when I was sure I had locked them. The tapping at the windows became regular. Every night at exactly 2:13 a.m., I started recording it on my phone, desperate for proof, but during the day, nothing showed up on the recordings. Only at night did the tapping return, as precise and deliberate as ever. One night, I woke to whispering, low, soft, almost comforting if it weren't so wrong. "You can't hide," the voice murmured. I froze, Rex growling, hackles raised, trembling beside me. Then silence. Nothing was there. Weeks passed with little sleep. My work suffered, and friends stopped calling after I refused invitations or failed to answer messages. I was isolated, paranoid, always alert, listening for the creaks, the whispers, the taps. My life became about survival within my own home. One night, the power went out entirely. Darkness swallowed the house. Rex whimpered, pressed close, and the tapping began immediately at the window. Then the whisper, "I know where you are." I tried calling for help, but phones were dead. Electronics were useless. I barricaded myself in the bathroom, knife in hand, listening to him pace, hearing the faint dragging of feet across the floor. I couldn't leave. Hours passed in that oppressive darkness. Only when the sun rose did the sound stop. By morning, everything looked normal. The handprints on the glass were gone. No scratches on the floor or walls, nothing. It was as if he had never been there. But I knew better. I left that day. Packed my essentials, left everything else behind, and never returned. Even now, months later, I still see him in my dreams, standing in the corner, black eyes staring, whispering, "You can't hide." Sometimes late at night, I hear faint tapping outside my windows. I tell myself it's the wind. I tell myself it's a branch, an animal, a coincidence, but deep down, I know the truth. He's out there, still watching, still patient.